On November 17, 2021, the CDC put out an urgent press release. Drug overdose deaths in the United States top 100,000 annually. There were an estimated 100,306 drug overdose deaths in the United States during the 12-month period ending in April 2021, an increase of 28.5% from fatalities during the same period the year before. Drug abuse has become a global issue over the last several decades. It traces back to the 1960s counterculture movement in the West. At the time, the so-called hippies sought to deconstruct and undermine all traditions. They attempted to replace the traditions with their own beliefs, moral standards, and lifestyle. LSD and psilocybin mushroom trips were viewed as spiritual explorations. Amphetamines and cocaine were used as uppers. Heroin and barbiturates were used as downers. Simply taking a tab of acid would deliver a pseudo-spiritual experience. Drug-induced hallucinations are not at all related to true orthodox spiritual practices. These experiences led many with true spiritual aspirations down a crooked path. Many pop singers and rock stars have died in their 20s and 30s, often due to drug overdoses. In the contemporary United States, the war on drugs has been the longest. For decades, the country's law enforcement has been dedicated to arresting and monitoring thousands of drug traffickers. Government officials have used repeated warnings against illegal drug use. Still, drug overdose deaths remain high. Nearly 841,000 people have died from 1999 to 2019 due to drug overdose. On October 26, 2017, then-President Donald Trump declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency and outlined ways to combat the problem. At a hearing of the Senate Finance Committee in February 2022 on youth mental health, Idaho Republican Mike Crapo remarked that there had been a staggering rise in teenage drug overdose deaths. Taking ecstasy and smoking marijuana has become commonplace among young people. Newer and stronger drugs, including fentanyl, continue to emerge. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. It is so deadly that it has been called a chemical weapon. 2 milligrams can be fatal. Yet such destructive drugs have been flooding American streets at a terrifying pace. They have killed many more Americans than other opioids. It is so easy to overdose on them. Where does the fentanyl and its precursors come from? In the issue brief, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission said fentanyl is trafficked into the United States by 2 primary methods. 1. Sent from Chinese suppliers via international mail or express consignment services such as UPS, FedEx, or DHL, and 2. Smuggled across the U.S.-Mexican border. The report cited the CDC findings that synthetic opioids, primarily illicit fentanyl, remain the largest cause of overdose deaths in the U.S. The CDC estimates that there were more than 93,000 drug overdose deaths in 2020. This is a 30% increase from the 72,000 deaths in 2019. According to the CDC, teenagers, especially black teens, are being hard hit. Drug deaths linked to synthetic opioids like fentanyl tripled among teenagers. They went up 5 times among black teens in the past 2 years. Where do fentanyl and its variations come from? China has been a major source of U.S.-bound fentanyl. Based on U.S. seizure data, fentanyl and fentanyl analogs were often mailed from China in parcel packages. These small packages were typically less than 1 kilogram in weight and had over 90% purity. The packages would arrive in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, then mixed with heroin or other illicit drugs. They may also be directly pressed into pills. The U.S. government, as well as many other countries, pressed the Chinese Communist regime to impose domestic controls on fentanyl analogs and precursors. From 2017 to 2019, China imposed several domestic controls on the fentanyl class of chemicals. In May 2019, it added more fentanyl-related substances. Did that stop the influx of the China-sourced drugs? Unfortunately, no. According to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection data, the seizures of fentanyl directly shipped from China declined in 2019, but Chinese traffickers shifted to sending not yet controlled chemicals to Mexico. In 2021, the Drug Enforcement Administration noted that Mexican cartels will remain the primary source of supply for heroin and finished fentanyl smuggled into the U.S. using precursors primarily sourced from China. Over the years, Chinese traffickers have increased cooperation with Mexican cartels. Mexican cartels have historically been involved in producing poppies in Mexico that are used to make heroin. Mexican anti-drug authorities have been ramping up the destruction of poppy fields across the country. So the cartels have shifted from heroin to synthetic opioids like fentanyl. Synthetic opioids are cheaper to make and more profitable. At the same time, Chinese traffickers sought to evade the Chinese government's increased regulation in 2019. Mexican cartels looked for ways to maximize their role in the illicit fentanyl trade. Chinese traffickers increased fentanyl precursor sales to them, and the China-Mexico connection grew. Matthew Donahue, the Deputy Chief of Foreign Operations for the DEA, spoke about this in March 2021. He described an unlimited and endless supply of precursor chemicals coming from China to Mexico. He noted that Chinese traffickers had virtually ceased making analogs to focus solely on precursors. Mexican government officials have worked with the DEA to dismantle established networks of manufacturing plants. These pill mills were controlled by the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco Nueva Generación, Jalisco New Generation cartel. How do they make illegal financial transactions? In February 2020, the U.S. Treasury Department described Chinese money launderers as key threats and vulnerabilities in the U.S. financial system. The DEA has also seen Chinese money launderers working with drug trafficking organizations in the Dominican Republic and Colombia. In November 2018, Jianbing Gan, a Chinese national based in Chicago, was arrested by U.S. authorities. He was suspected of money laundering for a cartel. This high-profile case shed light on the intersection of sophisticated financial transfers and drug trafficking. In March 2020, Gan was convicted of money laundering charges. In addition to the Gan case, in October 2019, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Oregon charged 3 Chinese nationals, Shefeng Su, Jinhua Liyan, and Zhang Kongsu, with money laundering. They were indicted for their roles in transferring bulk cash from Mexican drug cartels to Chinese nationals residing in the U.S. More recently, Zhuyong Wu, a Chinese national, was convicted for laundering drug proceeds for a Mexican drug cartel. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison in the U.S. District Court Eastern District of Virginia. He was also ordered to forfeit more than $4.2 million. It is difficult to know exactly how much money Chinese nationals have laundered for drug cartels. In the Gan case alone, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, estimated his operation laundered between $25 million and $65 million. 3 combined key factors have caused the deadly opioids, especially fentanyl, to flood the U.S. They are abundant drug sources in China, sophisticated money laundering systems from Chinese traffickers, and Mexican drug smuggling and distribution channels. This explains why American death tolls have increased at an alarming rate for the last few years, and the trend continues. The issue brief report concluded that the fentanyl challenge has grown in complexity since Chinese suppliers evolved their tactics in 2019. Drug producers and smugglers in China are becoming more sophisticated in evading the authorities. The growing involvement of Mexican cartels and advanced money laundering schemes have made it worse. As Chinese fentanyl networks diffuse and seek alternatives to China as a source for precursor chemicals, U.S. authorities will have to develop solutions that reflect the more globalized nature of the supply chains. More recently, a new class of synthetic opioids, a family of compounds called benzimidazoles, caught attention since it has similar killing power as fentanyl. The drugs are entirely different in chemical structure from fentanyl, but experts warn they can be just as deadly. Initial seizures of the drugs come from mailed packages originating in China, where their production is not controlled. Experts warn that benzimidazoles could be the kind of new pathways not controlled and harder to detect. Putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, the answer is clear to who kills the most Americans in this endless drug war that the U.S. has been battling for several decades. How can we end these deaths? The essential links are China-sourced deadly drugs and sophisticated money laundering systems from Chinese producers and traffickers. Without breaking them, the U.S. may never be able to win this deadly fentanyl drug war.